Welcome. Welcome to the gathering. Welcome to Union Theological Seminary. I especially want to welcome the Dharma teachers who have come and been a part of this event over the last 3 days, since Friday together. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Greg Snyder. I'm the Senior Director of Buddhist Studies here at Union Theological Seminary and also a Dharma teacher at the Brooklyn Zen Center. Seeing everybody coming in, it is clear to me, and I feel this in my heart. I'm very, very excited about this weekend. I'm very excited about what's unfolding here and feel that it's something important and appropriate to our time. And maybe any time in this country, but I just want to say that I'll say a little bit about Union and how this came about. So the Buddhist Studies program here has a couple of parts to it. One is the Masters of Divinity in Buddhism and Interreligious Engagement, but it also has, which is relevant to this event, the Thich Nhat Hanh program for Engaged Buddhism. And we at Union want to bring together the history of Engaged Buddhism and the history of Union Theological Seminary to bring events exactly like this one, to actually look at what it is to bring the Dharma, as the Dharma transitions into this country, what is it to metabolize our own histories in the Dharma, our own realities in the Dharma? What is it to metabolize social justice? What is it to understand these things together? And what's happened this weekend and other things that have happened here before are very close to that mission. So thank you for being here and being a part of it. And I will just say that this weekend came about in partnership in the beginning with Lion's Roar magazine, the Thich Nhat Hanh program for Engaged Buddhism and Lion's Roar magazine, and also in partnership with the teachers that were on the steering committee. And as it happened, it was really interesting because a lot of people were asked, do you think this is a good idea? Do you think that we can raise money for something like this? And there was just an excited absolutely, absolutely, absolutely from every corner of this planning. And so it unfolded into what we have had over this weekend and this event now. So I want to thank everybody who has been, I want to start by thanking everybody who has supported this. I want to thank the Arthur Vining Davis Foundations, the Hemera Foundation, and the Frederick P. Lentz Foundation, who have offered the funding to make this possible. I want to thank the steering committee for this, that cultivated this along the way, which was Myoke Kane Barrett Shonin, thank you, Galen Ferguson, Jules Shuzen Harris, Rhonda Mason, Gina Sharp, and Reverend Angel Kyoto Williams. And we have been working together, Lion's Roar, Union, Steering Committee, to bring this into being. I want to thank Melvin Mcleod from Lion's Roar and Kate Sand from Union. I don't know if Kate is here. I could not have possibly even thought about doing this without her. Union student volunteers, Wei Shen Wang and Rachel Airy, and finally Jessica DeJesus, who is the event planner and the rudder for the many months that this has come together. Thank you for everything you have done. So to orient this moment, what has happened here is that 30 Buddhist teachers have been in closed session since Friday, and tonight's event is the first public expression of what has happened. And I think it will probably be a decade before or more before we understand what has happened. But I believe what has happened is going to be seminal. I actually was very concerned that we have some of the archival footage from this for the Burke Library at Union, because I think in 20 years, Union students are going to want to look back and see what happened here. And it brings me great joy, and it is a tremendous honor to have been a part of this. Thank you. And I just want to finish with words. I asked the participants, I tried to get to everyone, but wasn't able to get to everyone. The participants for their reflections on this weekend, a single word or two about what happened here. And I'm going to end by reading those, and then I'm going to turn it over to Myoke and let the panel begin. So I'll start. Healing, life-changing, challenging, perfect, epic, liberation, transpersonal, timely, enlightened family, surprising, nurturing, miraculous, joyful champions, embodied, magical, nourishing, monumental, and I waited for my entire lifetime for this. Thank you all for being here.
Now I really feel tiny. Oh, yeah. It's off. Oh, thank you. I'm awake. Good afternoon, everyone. I would ask that you make sure your phones are turned off. I'm Myoke Kane Barrett. I'm from Houston, Texas, and I represent the Nichiren Shu tradition. We have a cross-section of various schools of Buddhism here today. So for this first hour, we're going to hear from these participants. They will introduce themselves, and then we will open the floor for your questions. So whatever happens is up to you. Thank you. Go ahead.
Would you like to start?
Sure.
Ralph,
I will. My name is Ralph Steele. I'm from Santa Fe, New Mexico. I used to be ordained in the Theravadan Buddhist tradition in Myanmar and Thailand. I have an online meditation-based trauma group as well as a meditation group.
thank you. Afternoon. My name is Gretchen Rohr. I am based out of Washington, D.C. I like to call New York home every so often, though. And I train and do hold space and teach periodically in the Theravadan tradition. I particularly focus my work at the intersection of social justice movements and tying those who wish to advance the dharma in action, whether it is with a big D or a small d, to our belief in our faith.
Good afternoon. My name is Lama Rod. So good to see everyone. I'm a Lama in the Vajrayana tradition, particularly in the Kagyu school of Tibetan Buddhism. I would say I'm representing Kagyu Buddhism, but I'm not sure if they're interested in me representing them right now. I'm a poor representation of the hegemony. But I think that, so I identify as a Vajrayana teacher, a tantric teacher. I'm a co-author of Radical Dharma with my sister and colleague, and sometimes mother, Reverend Angel Kyoto Williams. She's the mother of many of us. And I'm part of a new tradition called Bhumi Sparsha, which is a tantric, contemporary tantric community that tries to center justice in its work and liberation. Thank you.
Hi. It's nice to see you all here. Thank you for being here. My name is Gina Sharp, and I teach in the Theravadan tradition. I'm a co-founder of New York Insight Meditation Center in Manhattan, at Westchester Insight Meditation, and I'm on the Teachers Council of Spirit Rock Meditation Center in Woodacre, California.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ruth King, and I am a teacher in the Theravada tradition of Buddhism. I'm on the Teachers Council at Insight Meditation Community of Washington and Spirit Rock Meditation Community Center. I live in Charlotte, North Carolina. I am the author of a recent publication called Healing Rage. No, that's the first one. Sorry about that. Erase that. It's still relevant. I just want it. It's still recent and still recent. The recent publication is Mindful of Race, Transforming Racism from the Inside Out, which is an attempt to bring the intersections of mindfulness practice into an exploration of our racial conditioning and transformation. I have a training that's associated with that work that I offer to sanghas and groups, and I consider myself a heart activist. So I'm excited to be here with all of you this afternoon.
Peace and good afternoon. I am in awe. Look at that. What? My name is Joe Zen Tamori Gibson. I'm a student, trainee, guide, representer within Soto Zen Theravada as well. And I am a physical entourage and representation of everything that was just said, as much as possible to learn and to share. Yeah, thank you.
Good afternoon. Do I need to get closer? My name's Chinyo Atkinson. I am ordained and teach in the Soto Zen tradition, particularly in the lineage of Katagiri Roshi, or through Minnesota Zen Center, through my teacher. And I'm a member of the board of the Soto Zen Buddhist Association, which is a national association of Soto Zen Buddhists.
Thank you. So now it's up to you to ask whatever you'd like to ask. You have about 40 minutes before the panel will switch for another round of teachers to come up here. So please stay in your seats. We have runners with microphones on both sides of the room. So if you'll just raise your hand and they'll come run it.
Don't all rush.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. I just wanted to find out from each of you why you thought that it was important for Black Buddhists to get together, specifically.
In short, I was just invited. However, to help you out, I'm also a Vietnam vet, and I attend vet groups. And it's so wonderful when we come together. And Thanksgiving is getting ready to come up soon. And those of you who have family, it's wonderful to come together when you. So I will just pass the mic on that one, okay?
I can repeat that I was invited. So I will lead and give extraordinary gratitude to those who made this a reality. But as to what really compelled me to arrive, be present, and be excited about the invitation, is from what I feel is an opening that occurs in spaces when we are within our affinity groups, and particularly when we are with groups who have experienced, hold space for ourselves, our own bodies, and others who reflect us, that have faced significant structural racism, and how it can even play out within our own community. When in spaces with other people of color, which is often in the space that I hold or the spaces where I operate, there are a lot of different needs, and there are a lot of different forms of racial oppression, and a lot of different forms in which our liberation can express itself. And it's hard to dive into the unique shapes that can take within the Black community when not in an isolated space amongst other Black practitioners and teachers. So it gives an opportunity for us actually to hold ourselves more accountable on some of the stuff we may not even get to when we are in other mixed company, multiracial spaces, including and not including white practitioners and teachers.
I just think representation is very important. I'm tired of this mythology that Black people don't practice Buddhism. This is for my family, if you're watching. So gathering together and just having this documented is really, this should be something that's proof, particularly for all the other Dharma teachers who are saying that, there aren't any Black people in our tradition that practice this. This is really a mythology. And for me personally, I kind of came up in my tradition with no idea that there were Black people in Vajrayana Buddhism. The first Black teacher I met was me. I'm so lucky to meet me. And after I met me, then I was really spoiled. So I've become very critical of other teachers now, so.
Yeah, I just want to add that one of the beautiful things about coming together as a group of Black folks is we don't really realize what we're missing until we get in circle together. It's like there's a certain hunger that's there that you can't even touch until you're in the soup together. And it's a beautiful surrender and a beautiful uplifting and a beautiful reminder for us that the Dharma is deeper than a lot of the institutions that we find ourselves in, that liberation is deeper than just some notion of how one tradition teaches over another tradition, and that there's tremendous liberation in our connectedness, in our remembering of who we are and the various lineages that we've come from that are deeper and even run parallel to the Dharma. So there's just been a tremendous sea of bathing in this sense of spiritual wealth and this deep stream that I think has just been nourishing and refreshing and fortifying for us to do what must be done in our communities.
Ancestry was very important for me. Honoring elderhood was very important for me. Understanding what it means to be invited to hold a torch, carry a torch, what that torch feels like, heart to heart, hand to hand. Yeah, it was very important for me to feel that in the physical space.
We need to all understand or recognize that Dharma centers suffer the same sort of thread of racism that all other organizations in our society suffer from. And that first. And this is not necessarily the problem of the Black practitioner. I've been very fortunate to have found a welcoming Dharma family where I practice, which is in North Carolina, in Asheville, at Great Tree, and I'm very grateful for that. But also recognizing that even there, this insidious stream of whatever this disease is that plagues us is even there. Personally, I practice, as I said, in Asheville, North Carolina, up in the mountains. I'm the only Black person in that room, and I'm a teacher. What does that mean? To come here and sit with other teachers who have some of the same experience that I do, and the same background that I do, is very precious and very nurturing for me. It informs me, and it lets me see my blind spot of what's going on in my practice so that I can help others, and that, by others I mean all others, all other sentient beings, to see the real Dharma that is non-discrimination, that means non-discrimination, that means all sentient beings, whatever color their bodies are.
So many of us find ourselves in spaces where we're not allowed to talk about the suffering of racism. And it is a disease that infects all of us, especially in America. And if we don't talk about it, we'll never get rid of it. And so coming together allows us to talk about it, to share our wounds, to heal each other, to acknowledge the pain and the loss that we all suffer when we are separated. Next question, please stand up. Thank you.
Good afternoon, thank you. I heard some words that resonated with me. Engaged Buddhism, social justice. As someone who has been an activist, an artist activist for all of my adult life, my question is, what does engaged Buddhism look like? What is its role in social justice? And what is the role of Buddhism relative to the political process?
So first, I'd like to know why you asked that question.
Because as I stated, I'm an artist activist and someone who has been active in various movements and social justice movements. And I'm also...
Could you start again, because I think everybody couldn't hear you.
I asked the question because it's in my heart about activism. Mm-hmm. As someone, as I said, who's been an artist activist, as well as engaged in the political process. Mm-hmm. And I'm also a Buddhist, a practicing Buddhist with a particular sect here in New York City. Mm-hmm. So I am trying to reconcile all of that in terms of what is happening and how to be active. Mm-hmm. I know how to be active as an activist and an artist.
Great.
So what is the role of Buddhism?
Yeah.
Is it a passive thing? What does it look like?
Yeah, thank you. So I think one of the things that happens with us as Buddhists, or even the teachings that we receive, is that so much of it is setting a framework for a life that is loving, kind, free of suffering. And because what we receive is a framework, I think we begin to think that a Buddhist life comes through the mind. But it's actually the mind and the body and the heart. It's not just what I think or how I think that's important, but it's not 100% of practice. So practice involves what we do with our bodies and how we live in a community, and what that community means for us, and how we support that community with justice and kindness, and all of the ways in which we can imagine and envision ourselves living together as in that one body that we talk about as interconnectedness. It's so missing in our world. And so for me, whatever activism I do really has to do with manifesting these beautiful teachings that I have been given as a deep gift, a profound gift for living, is sharing that gift with my body, with my mind, with my heart, so that activism then is not a thing that's separate from who I am as a practicing Buddhist, but that it is inextricably connected. It's inexorable that if we have compassion and want the world to live in peace, and certainly have that peace within to offer to the external world, that it's a natural out-breath, in a way, to want to help the world find everyone in the world live in justice and peace and have the abundance that the universe has to offer. So that so that in some ways we don't even have to add the word Buddhist, right? We're just good people wanting the world to reflect what we feel inside in terms of our neighbors, everyone who lives in the world, whether it's in America or globally. So we're not contained, we're not limited to just our own liberation. Liberation is impossible if we're disconnected.
I'd like to add something to that. So much of this practice for me has been about a deep understanding of our interdependence, and also that every action I take plants seeds. So when I'm out there doing my artistry and my activism, a question I ask myself is, can I be in this dispute while I'm holding somebody's hand? You know, can I be in this fight while holding your hand and telling you how I really feel, but also maintaining some sense of heart and respect and presence and humanity? Can I do that? Can I know that what I'm saying is planting a seed that's going to bloom now or later? Can I attend to it with that sense of sensitivity and care while still saying what needs to be said and doing what needs to be done? So I think sometimes I have to ask myself that because the world is, you know, I'm 70, so it's not as bad as I've seen, but it's a real crazy time right now. And so what we do is so important. Our artistry is important, it's cultural medicine. It's important that we keep offering it up and showing up and doing our work of activism. But it's so important how we go about it, whether we leave our heart at the door or bring it with us, because we're planting seeds all the time. So we have to be more interested in our relational field. more than our righteousness or our conviction. We don't want our convictions to kill us or anyone else. So that's just practical moment-to-moment way I kind of integrate some of these things.
Somebody else speak.
Hi, my name is Damaris, and I'm a Tibetan Buddhist, Vajrayana tradition Nyingma. And I'm so glad I found you. It was by accident that I went to the Lion's Roar website, and it was like, oh. And I signed up immediately. I love my tradition, I love my teacher, but I need support because things are happening. And I know you understand because you're teachers, so I know you've been through the gauntlet. I don't want to leave my tradition. I know there are other traditions, especially in the city, that are arising and growing, and I'm so happy that's happening. But I would like to stay in my tradition, and I still need your support. And will you be having other programs where I can come in and touch in and at least have mentorship, someone that I can talk to, or spaces where I can kind of let it out without having to let it out there? Because I think that things are very complex, and it's very hard for me to know what's me, what's them, where is it meeting in the middle? How do I navigate it? Because I love them. I don't want to leave them.
That's right.
And that's why I'm standing up. That's it.
Yeah, thank you for identifying yourself. You can contact me anytime. I kind of get that. You know, I love Vajrayana Buddhism. I love the traditions. It reminds me of indigenous practice and blackness in a way that it's weird how it happened. You know, I had to go hang out with the Tibetans to realize my blackness, you know, and the practices that have been really the practices that my ancestors did and passed down but were disrupted by slavery and systematic oppression, and how Tibetans gave me permission back to talk to the ancestors and talk to the spirits and to talk to all these beings and to bring compassion and bodhicitta into all of that, you know, and to really like open up to this new way of being. So I really get that. And so feel free to reach out to me and we can talk more. We can talk after this, after the panel.
There was a person.
Hi, good afternoon. Can you hear me? Oh, I guess I have to speak louder. I'm nervous, so excuse me. Thank you all for being here. And thank you for sharing what you shared. I had no idea about any of this, and I received a message on my computer. And this is something that I have been looking for a long, long time. I'm very aware of my blackness, and when I let go of that, I'm reminded constantly. So I have kind of a two-part question. What challenges have you had to face as people of color in this tradition, and where you practice and where you go, and how did you overcome those challenges? What do you do? Because it's been a very long, lonely journey.
It's okay.
Are you speaking to a specific tradition or just for anyone?
One.
All right.
Anyone.
It's no more lonelier than you. You are just an extension of myself, personally. When I see you, I see me. And from being a kid, seeing different races separated by signs, to the Martin Luther King race riots and losing a lot of friends in deaths. And 18, 19 years old in Vietnam and losing a lot of friends except myself. And going through the epidemic of drugs and so forth. At a certain point, the practice begins to teach you how to let go or to let things be. But I say practice. And after you reach 5 to 10,000 hours, you begin to let things be. And then when you go over 10,000 hours of practice, yeah, now you're smiling. You want it, but you don't want to do the practice. There you go. And it's the same for the person with the activist question. And this, the Buddhist practice is not passive. It's very seriously active. Oh my God, yes. So it's up to you, or it's up to us.
You may be asking yourself, where do I practice those 10,000 hours? Perhaps, especially here in New York. One of my main practice home is Brooklyn Zen Center. I physically live in Jersey, but I will take that trek to be there, make time in my schedule. I'll look at my schedule, look at my life, and make room and make space in my life, especially the way that you articulated your understanding of the practice in that way. Another practice space in New York is New York Inside. These are two places that are very accommodating in terms of our POC folks. Right? They're not the only places, but they're the places that I practice in that way. That understand, that feel, we talk, we laugh, we dance in that way, and we practice. We don't do 10,000 hours at once. We spread it out a little bit. You know, and some of us, yeah, a year or two. A couple of us will say, oh, I'll get to the next 5,000 in the next lifetime. You know, but there's an understanding of that way. So I thank you for your practice. Yeah. When I see you on a train, we can sit next to each other and practice. Yeah.
I heard the question as a brave one, and also a question that's attempting to kind of ask, how are we coping in our practice when it's hard, and you know, when there's a lot of you know, maybe perhaps struggle around race and racism that are in the institutions that we're often in. And so I think some of the things that have been offered are certainly in response to that, but just to acknowledge that's kind of the way I heard the question. And what I can say to you from our journeys this weekend is that we're all playing with some variation of that. And the hard intention is to bring the wisdom of these teachings into the heart of the struggle that we have, and that is indeed a practice. So I just wanted to acknowledge what I thought I was hearing, and for you to know that you're not alone in that exploration, and that it's not like we have arrived, that we are constantly arriving and humbling ourselves and tenderizing our hearts around what humanness is, and what it means to really walk in the world with an open heart.
I'd also like to share a practice that helps me in these difficult times, is the practice of Bodhisattva Jofukyo, who says to everyone he meets, I respect you, I'll never despise you, I know you'll be a Buddha someday, even to the person who hates you.
That's beautiful.
Just to respond to what I heard in your question, because it's very much part of my life too, the loneliness. Practicing Dharma can be very lonely. It looks lonely because it looks like you're sitting on a cushion all by yourself. Sometimes, in my tradition, we turn towards the wall. In some traditions, you turn towards the Buddha. But we sometimes forget one of the triple jewels of Buddhism is Sangha. You can begin on your own. You can begin Dharma practice anywhere. You can begin it right now, sitting right there. But a very important part is finding those people that you can practice with. And it's going to take some effort. And I don't like the idea of calling it shopping. But sometimes, you know what's good when you walk in the room, and you know what fits. And sometimes you got to give some people a chance, And sometimes you got to take what you can get and work with those people and make them connect, make your connections there. So it's an effort on both sides. Do not give up. We're sitting here. Find us. And find us is not just, walking around door to door, but check here first and make the connections because they're real. This interconnection of all beings is real. You touch it sometime. That's why you're sitting here talking about it, even though you might not have the terms for it. But it's there. Sorry. That's why I can't do this.
We have time for about 2 more questions.
Hi, first of all, thank you so much for coming here. This is heaven to me, actually. I have one question, actually 2, but they're related. The first question is, what is it that you think that you all bring uniquely, being Black, into Buddhism? Like, what is it that you feel is unique in terms of what you can bring to those spaces that others perhaps cannot? And related to that is, I'm looking at this, and this is a great visual, in terms of all of you here. But I don't really believe in visuals and just staying in visuals. So how, because frankly, a lot of us are going to go back to a Sangha that don't look like this. So how do we move beyond, how do we move these spaces to spaces where this is no longer an anomaly, where this is the common thing, where we have people like yourself, there and in leadership, and their voices are heard and things. How do we transform those spaces where this is not just one event coming together and here you are, and then we go back to the normal?
I can make an attempt at starting that. Well, first, I think it's worth saying the face of white supremacy bears many shades. So I actually don't think I bring anything unique just because I am Black to spaces. If I'm choosing to direct my shade to respond to white supremacy, it's not sufficient. My practice space is multiracial, if not in fact primarily amongst Black people. And so what I bring is a knowing. And I don't know if I would bring that if I were not working with Black people. So it is something that there will be other answers in this room. What I do bring is that my first teacher of meditation was actually a Black Panther who found herself teaching herself meditation in isolation behind bars. And it was not in the context of the Theravada and the Buddhist tradition that I ultimately learned from my second teacher, Gina Sharp. The integration of those teachings, I think, is something that I actually feel a sense of. Many other Black Buddhist teachers, whether they share my same background as having trained with Panthers and trained with Buddhist teachers or not, it is one in which I value a liberation that maintains an understanding the value of self-determination and of interdependence, and that there are resources and ways in which we can feed each other that are not simply based on a fighting or a resistance to some other, but ways in which we need to feed ourselves and each other and have a deep love. And just briefly also in response to the question as to an example of engaged Buddhism, I see it as an engagement with my aligned values. A practice, for example, of mindfulness is mindless if it's not driven by a value system. And to engage that value system, whatever it is, there is a demand and there is a need and there's a call for it right now. And I am very much inspired by the work of some of the partners that I support. I'm honored to support through governance, leadership with the Buddhist Peace Fellowship, which has for decades now operated within that space. They have a program called Build Block B, and it breaks down, I think, to me, what is the simple concept of engaged Buddhism, which is build the good stuff, block the bad stuff, be in alignment with your Buddhist values. That's what it is for me.
Have the last question, please.
Hi. Okay, so many of our Buddhist institutions, Dharma centers, study centers, and the like, they're still white dominated, and last time I checked. And sometimes as people of color, we get invitations to participate in the decision making that goes on, whether on teachers' councils, boards of directors, executive management. But the pace of change can be pretty glacial. It kind of feels like walking through an ocean of spiritual bypass. So I guess my question is, what do you see in the next 10, 20 years worth of future for the maximum flourishing of POC, and specifically Black American Buddhists in America? Do we continue pushing from within when we get invited to have a seat at the table? Or is there a path external to these institutions? Is there a lever to press on that you can see for change to happen at a slightly more revolutionary pace? Like question.
I love that phrase.
This is a small question that will just take a couple of minutes to answer. Okay? No big deal. So the answer is yes and yes. That there are many ways, many pathways to the, I don't like the word diversity and inclusion anymore. They're overused, and I'm hoping that we'll find other words to use because they roll so easily off the tongue and yet are losing their meaning. However, I think that yes, there are ways, and I know, Ed, that you've been trying to work within in certain institutions, and that it is glacial, but it's always been glacial. And perhaps what happens is because these are Buddhist spaces, we think somehow that they should be sincere, and they should be receptive, and they should be transparent, and they should be all of those things, and yet they're human. And we're complicated beings who may have the best of intentions and yet are deeply, deeply, deeply conditioned in a racist society. And that the resistance to that kind of to deracializing the mind is high, because we're humans, and so we love our conditioned minds, because we've been living with them for a very long time, and we're very familiar with them, and that's what we want to do. So patience beyond Job is necessary, to use a Christian character. And sometimes also it needs not just the patience of working from within, which can be useful, but also figuring out ways to be creative and listening deeply to what is needed, and listening deeply without the reference of the larger society, but learning your own ways of, through your own love and your own compassion and your own kindness and your own willingness to put your body on the wheel, creating your own ways of finding those pathways. They're there, but they have to be excavated. So I would say, as a short answer to you, that yes, it's frustrating to work from within, and yet it's necessary. And it's also necessary to find our own ways of working, so that we can find spaces like the space that we created in this room this past weekend, where we can actually work together and envision another way of being in this society.
Thank you, Gina.
If I could just add briefly, just at the individual level, in terms of our own stamina and capacity. I often say to people, we have to, when I grew up, we played bid whist. It's a card game. And so you either bid or you pass, and sometimes you lied about it, but you're trying to win the game or play the game. And sometimes we have to bid or intervene in the things that are slapped in our faces, and sometimes we have to pass and take a look at and care for our own nervous system, our own reactivity, and our own ability to actually adjust our nervous system through the practice, or just through a sense of being with what's here. So sometimes we intervene at the individual level in our relationships. Sometimes we intervene at the group level, and we come together and find people like ourselves with like minds. And then sometimes we intervene at the institutional level. We can't intervene on all of it all the time. Mm-hmm. So there needs to be some choicefulness around how we respond to the wackiness that's there. And to know that we like Gina's saying, we need care, but also choicefulness around how we do that.
So, unfortunately, we have to release this panel. So, could we give them a round of applause? Thank you all very much. We'll get the next panel up here.
the temperature, right? Oh, good. Good. That's a good sign. Yeah, we're gonna go get some sleep after, well, on the plane.
Here she comes.
Is there? Yeah, Angel's ready. Are we gonna start in like 5 minutes or 10 minutes? We're starting now. Oh, we're starting now. Okay. Angel, that's mine. Angel. Angel. That's mine.
Okay, great.
What's her name?
Angela Dews.
Angela what?
Dews. D-E-W-S.
Dews.
Yes. You know Angela Dews? Yes. Yes. No, of course not. Of course not. I've never seen you talk to her.
Yes. I'm happy with it at all. What'd you say?
You just a jingling.
I'm jingling, baby.
Jingle, baby. Go ahead, baby.
You're jingling too, baby. Go ahead, baby.
No, you're not messing around at all. So we have, speaking of mic.
We have now about 55 minutes. The faster you get there, the faster we'll start. Thank you. So we'll start with Camilla Harris, who will introduce herself.
She called me Camilla Harris. That's kind of a compliment. Isn't that the senator? Did she call me the senator? That's kind of a compliment. Did she call me the senator? I'll take the compliment. Thank you. But actually, my name is Camilla Mcleod. Good afternoon. And welcome. So happy to be with you here. I started practicing Nichiren Buddhism with the SGI in 1982. I was introduced by my mother, Laila Mcleod, and had the great good fortune to, in the first decade of my practice here in Harlem District and take the subway down every morning to the SGI USA Community Center on 14th Street for morning gongyo and morning prayers. So that was very beautiful early grounding in my practice with Black people right here in Harlem, and I currently practice and live in the DC area, specifically in Alexandria West District with members of the SGI there. And I teach and lead around Buddhism and mental health and Buddhism and social justice.
Good afternoon. My name is Angel Kyoto Williams. I was raised up, as they say, in the Soto Zen tradition. I spend my time expounding upon and thinking about radical dharma, which is the title of a book that I co-wrote with Lama Rod, who is up here, and also Dr. Yasmin Saidullah. Its subtitle is Talking Race, Love, and Liberation. Yeah, I feel like that's what I'm doing, exploring that, and really understanding how the Dharma has something for all of us to understand the implications and impacts of race, upon all of our bodies towards seeing a path of liberation so that we can all get free from the ways that binds us.
I'm Panyawati, and I am as far as I know, the only African American Theravada Bhikkhuni. It's been that way for the close to 20 years I've been in, so I know something about aloneness. I won't call it loneliness, but aloneness. I'm also a Zen Dharma holder under Bernie Glassman, and ordained Chan, and I practice Vajrayana. So, and I was a former pastor. My engagement has mostly been around working with the untouchables and homeless youth and that sort of thing for the past decade. But I'm 70 now, and I'm thinking that there needs to be something left for the next generation so they don't have to struggle like we have done. They don't have to be in institutions they don't want to be in, but we had nothing. And so I'm dedicating these last couple of years of my life to creating something outside of the containers that we were all raised in. So I do have a very large retreat center in North Carolina. I have a residential community there. We have an activist training program there. We have a local sangha there. Of course, the local sangha is all white because I live in the mountains of Appalachia, outside of Asheville. But it's designed to create a landing place outside of the institutions that have bound us. And the only way to be able to move forward is you got to have something of your own.
Good afternoon. So wonderful to see you all here. I am, my name is Conda Mason, and I am a teacher and a student of the Dharma. I am Theravada currently. I got introduced to the practice in Tibetan, in Vajrayana was my first tradition. And actually those of you who, I see some old friends out here, those of you who know me back when, I was in New Zealand with the band that I used to manage called Ibis. And one of the outgrowths of that trip is that I got introduced to Lama Zopa in New Zealand, in Auckland, New Zealand, and it just took off from there. So, and then I've been in Vajrayana, in Theravada for a while now. And let's see, I'm also, I'm connected with the East Bay Meditation Center in Oakland, which is the bomb center, I have to say. Y'all need to come out. And I am also connected to Spirit Rock. I'm on the board of Spirit Rock as well. And I'm in a teacher training right now that has 20 people in the cohort. There's 20 of us in the cohort. This is the first. 20 people in the cohort, 18 are people of color. And so 2020, and IMS is doing the same thing, which my brother was in, Joe Zen, who just spoke. And so when we come out in 2020, there's going to be a good 40 or so, or 18, 16, I can't do the math, teachers of color coming out of this next 2 cohorts. So that's going to have a huge impact on the face of the Dharma. My particular interest, what I'm doing is, I also am a business person. And so my best use of the Dharma is in business. And how do we use our practice in business? How does business get influenced by the Dharma, really? Business and money and finance. And how does that, how can we actually create the world that we all actually want to see through business and money and Dharma? That's what I'm trying to figure out.
I am Dawa Tarchin Phillips. I am a Vajrayana Lama. with lineages of the Kagyu and Nyingma schools of Tibetan Buddhism. I am a former monk. I trained 12 years in a monastery in France, spent 7 of those years in meditation retreat, and now am the resident teacher of a meditation community in Santa Barbara in California. I teach meditation retreats and courses both on the ground and online, and I'm also very active in the global mindfulness movement, particularly focusing on leadership and how to evolve leaders in organizations, in government, in education, in healthcare, into a different, more awake form of leadership. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Pamela Ayo Yatunde. I go by Ayo. I first want to thank all the people who planned this gathering, especially Union for hosting us. There are not many Christian seminaries that would host a gathering like this, as you can imagine. Also want to thank Lions Roar for the work that they did in bringing us together, so thank you all. I also want to take a liberty and say that for those of you who have questions about how to improve conversations around race in your sanghas, there are 2 books that you must read. Because the authors are here and probably won't promote their books like I will. One is Mindful of Race by Ruth King, who you heard from earlier, and the other one is Radical Dharma, co-authored by Angel Kyoto Williams and Lama Rod Owens, who you met earlier, and Yasmin Saidulla. Did I pronounce her name correctly? Sadullah. Thank you. Okay, so I wanted to get that out of the way. I grew up in the United Methodist Church. I was introduced to Buddhism through the teachings of Thich Nhat Hanh in 2001, shortly after the bombing of the World Trade Center. And so it was and also introduced to meditation and Buddhism through the Zen Hospice Project of San Francisco. So those 2 kind of converged around the same time. Very powerful convergence for me. And currently I teach pastoral care and counseling as an assistant professor at United Theological Seminary of the Twin Cities, which will be in St. Paul. Pretty soon we're moving. And I work as a pastoral counselor. And for some reason or another, I love writing about Buddhism and don't have a problem critiquing it. And I want to take another liberty, and then I'm done, which is there was a question about, I think it was something about why Black folks in Buddhism and why have we gotten together? What do we have to offer? And in thinking about that, at that time came to me, well, there's AME, there's CME, there's the Nation of Islam, there are a variety of African American Jewish traditions, and one of the reasons why these traditions came up is because the conventional ways of teaching those particular traditions were not speaking to those people, or they were in some way colluding with the systems that were keeping them enslaved, oppressed, and so on. So it's real important for us to get together and find out whether our various Buddhisms are really offering what they promise, and if not, what do we need to do to make them, if necessary, and if possible, make them speak to the situations that we find ourselves in now.
So I'll just briefly introduce myself again. Myoke Kane Barrett. I am the North American Bishop of the Nichiren Shu Order. I am also the resident priest of the Myokenji Temple in Houston, Texas. My social activism, more criminal justice, have 2 prison communities that are very active and very strong. I find that to be a perfect arena to introduce the Dharma. I've been a member of the Nichiren tradition for over 50 years. I found out when I was training to become a priest that it is my birth religion, but nobody told me that until then. So I am the very first Western woman and also a woman of African-Japanese descent to be ordained in this tradition. And the floor is yours.
Hi. I had this question for the last panel, but I am very curious to hear from you as well. As a student in Buddhism, and a few of my teachers have been up on the panel, I am curious how we can support you and how we support this, next generation of teachers that are coming out. It's very exciting to have more representation and to have more people at the front of the room, but my understanding of many traditions is that students support their teachers, and I think that my experience of you all is that some teachers are rooted in institutions and in place, but you have described that some of you are separate from us, not necessarily where we are. So yeah, I'm curious what you think about how teachers of color and Black teachers in particular can be supported.
It's a great question, because in these gatherings and other conferences of Buddhist teachers or Dharma teachers, it's something that comes up often, because a large percentage of Dharma teachers in the US struggle to find the support that they need to fully focus on teaching only Dharma. And partially, I think that is due because we're trying to implement models they're rooted in a very different cultural context, in an Asian context where the lay community has a very personal, deep connection to the monastic community, and they're used to supporting that monastic community through donations. It's a little bit different in the American meritocracy, so to speak, that we're operating in, which is much more individualistic, and also a lot of the Dharma centers aren't monastic either. And so these discussions come up often, and partially I think what restricts them is that there is a taboo to really talk openly about money in Dharma centers, and to have a frank discussion with teachers and with students about how financial models actually can work that are sustainable both for the students who want to have great instructions and guidance and committed teachers at their disposal, or rather at arm's length, and for the teachers who are trained to be fully engaged in leading communities, but oftentimes have to circumvent that because they need to make ends meet. So I think the first step is be willing to have conversations about money and not think that that is non-dharmic. Yeah, and realize that there's an emotional charge around that, particularly in communities of color, but really in America, money is a source of pain, and is emotionally charged, it's afflicted, it is a whole history of affliction, and so people avoid it. And in the Judeo-Christian traditions, out of which many people come to the Dharma, it's similar. There's a lot of misunderstandings between spirituality and money. And so the Dharma communities oftentimes are economically very weak. Yeah? And the part of that is because we're avoiding the topic. And I think that we're at a time now when I think we can make a change there by having open conversations that are around how to build sustainable communities, sustainable teacher-student relationships, sustainable retreat models, sustainable education models that will work for everyone, so that we can have also future generations of teachers, because many of the teachers you see today, because of their relationships to Asian communities, also still have access to other support models, but in the future that won't be, not necessarily the case. We have to become autonomous within the US, and that requires us to talk about these things and think through together what can work. Yeah, so that's for the economic side of the support. The other support is the spiritual side, and that really is about mutual commitment. And to understand that the commitment is the currency by which really we can work together and achieve something for your benefit and for the benefit of all beings. In many relationships that we have in the world, commitment comes at the end. It's like, I've known you, we've dated, you know, you bought me dinner, you know, you took care of my dog, whatever. We trust each other, and now maybe let's find a place of commitment. And that's completely understandable, but we have to understand that with the Dharma transmission, commitment is also a starting line. And it doesn't come at the end. It comes at the beginning of a completely different relationship. Maybe not unsimilar as in romantic life, yeah? But so to be willing to see commitment as an important ingredient of a Dharma relationship. Because Dharma ultimately is about transmission. It's about that something that's a wisdom wealth that we have within humanity doesn't get lost between one generation and the next. Yeah? Okay.
And I'd just like to add that there's a Christian scripture that says where one's heart is, there their treasure is also. And so, I mean, like, there are no children in this room. Everybody knows that they put their money in the places that matter the most to them. And so that's the only question that I ask: what matters the most to you? What allows you to be able to function day after day in a world full of suffering and antagonism and grief? And if the Dharma does something for you in that area, if the Dharma does soothe that for you, and if the Dharma does give you a way of escape from that kind of suffering, then it should be a naturally unfolding action to put your money or your treasure where your heart is. And so for me, I'm coming from that point. The Buddha said that's the perfect gift, the one that's given from the heart. I'm not going to beat somebody over the head about it. If we lose the place, we lose the place, you know. But to have it and to treasure it because of how it feeds us, what it gives to us, that's the essence of the perfect giving. Most of us, or in my generation, came out of church. I'm finding out that's not the case now. But we understood about giving. But now that we don't have a God that's going to, if we don't give, now we don't give. You know, so we need to check. We need to check ourselves.
Yeah, next question, please.
Yeah, okay, I was going to add something.
Welcome to Union Theological Seminary. I'm Tara Chung. I'm teaching Love Meet Wisdom Buddhist Christian Dialogue here. Union is a very special place for Black people because we have a Black theologian called James Cone. He said God is black and white Christianity is the devil. And what is good for white people is what is evil for Black people. And he said Jesus was black. So he really deconstructed how this white Christianity really oppressed many people of color, Black people, justifying slavery. So I see U.S. Buddhism in a very kind of similar light. Yes, it came from Asia, but it is mainly transmitted by white middle-class Sangha. So in that process, something lost in translation. So I'm thinking maybe we need Black Buddhaology of liberation also. And I'm a direct disciple of Thich Nhat Hanh, and I'm a liberation feminist theologian, and I have a question for you. James Cone, Elie Wiesel, Gutierrez, they all said, you have to take side. If you don't take side in the midst of conflict and struggle, your silence, you're not taking side, always support oppressor. And non-duality we are teaching in Buddhism. Of course, the ultimate level, there's a non-duality. But historical level, there's a white supremacy and fascism and Black Lives Matter. So I want to ask you, Thich Nhat Hanh always talked to me, don't take any side, his position. And all my liberation theologian teachers said, take side, otherwise you always support oppression. So how do you teach this teaching of non-duality in the concrete historical struggle of power?
Oh, I love that question. I love that question.
Thank you. It feels like the question was full of answers, and certainly the preface was too. So thank you for all the wisdom that you expressed in your preface to the question and in your question. And I also want to thank the person who asked the previous question about how do I support teachers. It's a beautiful question. That question itself was an offering, and I just want to deeply appreciate it. And respond to it to say that one way to support teachers and to support each other generally as interdependent human beings is through deep care for ourselves and deep reflection on how we can manifest more of our own enlightenment. And then the confidence to reach out to other people and say, hey, you want to practice together? Because manifesting enlightenment, whatever your tradition, involves a living practice that you have to do every day, at least probably a few times a day, so that you can maintain some equilibrium with your enlightened experience. So I think that reaching out and joining each other in practice and having the confidence that everybody would like some breaking of their isolation in practice and reaching out to each other is one way we do that. In terms of this question of how we, or whether or not we choose sides, I was thinking about something Dr. King said is in terms of, the question is not whether or not we are extremists. The question is whether we will be extremists for hate or extremists for love. And so when Shakyamuni Buddha said, you know, my desire and my vow is to make all beings equal to me, he was talking about the vow to make all beings equal in enlightenment, right? So with those truths, we can confidently trust the wisdom that emerges from our practice to guide us to handle all sides of the conflict with the wisdom that emerges from practice and from profound love, and most deeply from our vow, from this vow to make all beings equal in enlightenment. And the piece about that that's important is we don't desire to all be equal in, you know, pettiness or equal in competitiveness or partisanship, right? We desire to be equal in having an enlightened experience of reality. So it requires, I think, our practice to figure out how do we wisely engage a situation where there's conflict. And just very briefly, I'll tell you one of the first things I chanted about as a Buddhist in 1982 at Mount Holyoke College, you know, really literally started practicing the August I went there, was some racism that I was encountering from a professor who told me Shakespeare, Chaucer, and Milton were the only classic authors I could write about. And I was like, what? And the Buddhist leader said, chant about it. And it is through my practice that some wisdom arose in terms of how I would handle and change this situation. So I hope that offers a little bit of insight, and I'm sure others can say more.
I'm going to take a liberty and go back to the question I think we were having. Part of our discussion was about our relationship to finances, as Dawo was saying. So I want a short answer is write checks. and recognize that many of us, in fact, have left institutional support in order to save our practice. Right? We actually we made the choice to leave the safety and security of an institutional framework or structure in order to maintain the integrity of our dharma. We stepped outside of those institutions and structures, which leads to the other question: take sides, but take care in that taking sides. That I don't think that the taking sides suggests that we negate the humanity of everyone else's location and position, but that we take sides and we understand that our location in taking sides also has to take care of the whole, and then in so doing, we are including, and so it becomes a not taking sides. So we take sides in a way that doesn't take sides. We take sides in a way that doesn't separate. It distinguishes and it discerns, but it doesn't negate. It doesn't disappear. And I think it's a very important aspect of what the Dharma has to bring to Western construct that lives inside of dichotomies. It's either me or you. And so even take sides sounds to us from our Western perspective and framework of taking sides just means I'm taking only my side. And it's hard for us to reconcile the non-binary nature of taking sides, where we can take it, where our taking sides is actually a wholeness. It's not a separation. That we find our wholeness in our firm and clear locating ourselves on the side of love, and that in that locating ourselves on the side of love, we're becoming more whole. It's a yes. Rather than a no. So the taking sides is a yes to love rather than a no to you and if I'm saying yes to love, I have to include love of you even from this side.
I'll just add one little thing to that too. Thank you, Angel. That there is in my book, I agree with everything you just said, because there's this, we have a difficulty with paradox in our minds, like either or, and paradox is what most of life is, really. It's the container for both and you definitely take sides. I agree 100%. And that I'm always thinking about, like, harm. What's going to cause the least amount of harm? And if someone is absolutely, or something is absolutely causing harm, I absolutely take sides that is not cool. That's not okay, right? That's not okay. So this container of equanimity is holding it all in this we space, in what is best for we, in this container of all of us. If there's something happening, or some ideology or activity that is absolutely against and harming, then it's really important that we're clear. And that it's not like somebody said earlier, that Buddhism is supposed to be this like pablum, everything's okay. That's not it at all. And finding that we space is really an important place, where you don't put anybody out of your heart, but you also you say no, right? You say no firmly, and you don't push them out of your heart. So that's kind of the space that I think.
So that's sort of the difference between fighting and fighting the good fight. So we have to decide whether we want to just fight or fight the good fight. And whatever energy we bring into it, the Buddha said that hatred is never overcome by hatred. So if hatred is what's motivating and propelling me, then I'm not able to fight the good fight. So I have to step back, and I have to deal with that which is rising up in me. And when that's taken care of, then I'm qualified to fight the good fight. Some people want to do a good thing, but they haven't taken the route of discipline to subdue their own demons. And so their action then carries the energy of where they are. And so it's incumbent upon us first to find out where we are, you know, and how much we can stand. You know, count up the cost before you go into battle. If you can't handle it, don't go, you know. But if you can, then go, and not necessarily expecting that you're going to see the reward or the fruit of that. You may never see it in your lifetime. Does that make a difference as to what you do? Some of us are stepping forward in things and initiating things that we will never see the fruit of it, but we know that we planted the right seed and we've given it the right energy, and in its due season, it's going to bear forth fruit. And so that's how we have to go into every struggle. Or particularly when we come in a time like this, when everybody around us is losing they're just losing their mind, losing their wits, no stability to be found anywhere. But if I already know there's no stability to be found, I'm not looking for it out there. You know, the only stability that's going to be out there is the part I take with me and take out there. And so we turn our practice back to ourselves continually, then we get the vision of what we can do out there that will be fervent and yet it'll be effective.
I just want to add, I think that one of the unique things that Black folks bring to the Dharma, and you know, in speaking about the lost in translation, is that we can't afford that not take sides too. And I think that privilege allows people to sit in that location of like, oh, we're going to have a Dharma that's about not taking sides. And I think it really Black folks, particularly like colored folks and Black folks most especially, really bring forth the truth of we can't afford that to be the Dharma that is expressed through these bodies, and if Dharma is going to be authentic through our bodies, we can't sit in that location of we're not taking sides.
Yeah. Real quickly, Thich Nhat Hanh is Black. You know, you were talking about God is Black. James Cone saying God is Black, Jesus is Black. Thich Nhat Hanh is Black. In this respect, during the Vietnam War, all Vietnamese were Black. Okay, and so I just want to say that. 1, 2, Thich Nhat Hanh has taken sides many times. He takes the side of compassion. He takes the side of wisdom. He takes the side of non-aggression. His coming from Vietnam to the United States, the belly of the beast, in order to transform our ways of aggression to save his people, was a choice in taking a side to be here, to make that change, and that's what we have to do. And lastly, when Trump was commenting on the violence, I guess you will, the movement in Charlottesville, Virginia, saying that there were bad people on both sides. So it's real important for us when we hear this talk of non-duality that we in our wisdom and compassion know when that's being used or when we're using it to subvert the conversation that needs to take place.
Next question. Sorry.
It's okay, just short. I'll make it short. But because you asked the question around non-duality, I do believe that Buddhism, because of its very nature of the teaching, easily lends itself to confirm pre-existing beliefs, yeah, and pre-existing attitudes, and then to say, well, the Buddha said, and so therefore I'm good, right? And so if you're looking to confirm what you're already thinking, the Buddha's teaching might not be the right place, yeah? Because it's really the job of the Buddha's teaching to show you that you have a limited perspective if you think you're right, no matter what you're thinking. And the other thing is, I think, when you're taking sides, that can also be abused by propaganda intentions. And I think that taking a stand is an important alternative to taking a side, because the taking a stand makes it really clear what it is that you want to see happening. Yeah? And people can rub themselves against your stand and really learn from your stand, and it's not so easily misused. Because having an opponent oftentimes gives power to the other side, and routs the other side.
Now for the next question. Thank you, Dawa.
Thank you and good afternoon. I opened up with a question about why Black Buddhists, But now I want to ask, and you're kind of skirting around this in a lot of what you all are saying. Some of you have come to Buddhism from other religious traditions, or maybe no religious tradition, I don't know, I don't want to make assumptions, but I just want to know, what is it about Buddhism, someone who is trying to understand it, what is it about the Buddhist tradition, and you use the word dharma a lot, that drew you to it, and what is it that you think it brings to you and allows you to share with others?
I can say that I was raised as a Methodist, and I had to go to church every Sunday, and every time I had a question, they couldn't answer my questions. I was always told, you just have to believe, and when you believe, you'll figure it out. And when I was taken to a Buddhist activity, I knew I had come home, absolutely, because everything I learned said, it's up to you. You are responsible, and you take charge of your own life, and everything you need is within you. You just have to bring it out. And so that, for me, was heaven. And I said, okay, even though my mom said not to do it, I said, I'm raring to go, and I never looked back. And I did that at about 12 years old.
I say that, you know, growing up Baptist, I loved my Baptist church, especially the music. I was in the choir and all that. And growing up as Black in America, and you know, from a family, it was always about freedom and liberation. You're going to find freedom one day. Black people are going to find freedom. I mean, that's just was a meme that was in my head my whole life. Freedom and liberation. And I really enjoyed Baptist church. I loved a lot about it. And I did not understand the path to liberation. And what I do understand is that there is a path to liberation in the Buddha Dharma. And I feel that the one thing about Buddhism, I think of Buddhism as Buddhist psychology more than religion, honestly. And because it's just step by step, like the Buddha said himself, you know, don't take my word for it, see if it works for you. Right? And there's the steps of looking at it. When I look at the basic teachings of the Four Noble Truths, and, you know, dukkha, there's a reason for dukkha, for suffering, there's a reason for it, and it can change, and this is how. And when you look at all those things, and I see the more I practice is about practice, and really understanding the mindfulness. And I start seeing within myself where my liberation is right here. My lack of liberation is right here. This is where my lack of liberation is. It's not outward. Okay, yeah, there's a lot of things that can help, right? But my being locked in is inside myself. And what mindfulness, my practice has done, what it does is show me where I'm tripping myself up, you know? Like really, like where I am absolutely telling myself all these stories and how I'm living a life that is sabotaging my own liberation. And so as I practice and as I go deeper into the Dharma, you see that path, you see that light, and you touch it. You know, you actually, I have had moments where, you know, you touch it. And so that is why, for me, it is a practical methodology, psychology, that actually can get us towards the liberation of our heart and our minds, as well as, and then to me, there's about co-liberation. It's not about just my liberation. It's about our liberation. And what I can see in myself, I can see in you. And so there's that element of being in relationship. It's a relational practice. And so being in relationship in a community, in Sangha, and being able to move forward. And so I just find it to be really clearly, it goes back to the meme that I grew up with, you know, freedom and liberation. And this is the path that I actually it's step by step. I see it, and I feel it, and I step into it, and I touch it, and it feels great.
I grew up in a Muslim community. I grew up Muslim, and was born Muslim, grew up Muslim, and in a very black Muslim liberation practice. And so when I began practicing Buddhism, when my mother started introducing me to Buddhism, the concepts of compassion and the concepts of inner transformation and the concept of absolute freedom, enlightenment as absolute freedom, really resonated with me as someone who had always been thinking about liberation, right? As people of African heritage, I think we have a unique lens on liberation and a unique lens on efforts that have been made to stifle our liberation. So it was a very natural process for me to begin practicing Buddhism, recognizing that the first place to be free is within ourselves, right? That decolonizing our minds and, erasing racism from our self-concept and our sense of possibilities. And that human revolution, that inner cleansing, is the part that made me see how much I was in charge, that there was no one that was going to damn me or bless me, that I had to work it out, that this life was going to be blessed or damned to the degree that I took action to enrich myself and enrich the lives around me, and particularly the teaching about interconnectedness and interdependence, and that, we're all so deeply connected, and having the compassion to be able to really feel other suffering and work to alleviate suffering from that place of connectedness. I was reading something, Gwendolyn Brooks has this quote where she says, "We are each other's harvest, we are each other's business, we are each other's bond and magnitude." And I was thinking about that. And so those kinds of things drive me in my practice, because every day is a day. And, I chant and I'm like, okay, what else going to do today? What am I going to do today? So whether I'm going to march or I'm going to teach, or, I'm going to have a restful day, to try to take my enlightened self forward into that and encourage other people's enlightened self to emerge is always the vision.
We have time for about one more question.
Hey, thanks for having this event and this gathering. Oh, sorry. Just a quick question, or maybe not a quick question. What do you all want to share with us from what happened this weekend?
What do you want to share with us?
From what happened this weekend.
No, I want to keep it all to myself. I'm like, no, and I really mean that, exactly that. Like, this was ours, and we got a chance to be with ourselves and not have to report or perform. Not that we're performing, but we just got to be with us as us, doing us, being with us, and it's not for y'all.
I want to share that I really believe that the work that we did this weekend, and I feel you about wanting, I'm not going to tell any of our secrets, but I will say that I feel confident. I'm looking at everyone in the audience. We have a very diverse audience, that no matter how you identify, if you've had concerns about what you can and cannot talk about in Sangha, that's going to change.
And I will say, sorry.
I just want to share one thing, and that is that it was amazing, and it's a precursor to a bigger one that we're having at Spirit Rock in California next year in October 8th to the 14th. And it's going to be a large one where Black Buddhist teachers will be invited. So if that sounds like you should keep an eye, because I think Lion's Roar is going to be our media sponsor and will be helping us, and Melvin will be announcing it. And so pay attention to Lion's Roar. Thank you again, Melvin. But it's October at Spirit Rock, October 8th to the 14th next year, and it's going to be big. And more people will be invited, as well as the public will be invited for the last 2 days of it. So it's a week long. So yeah, so this was the beginning of that.
What I was going to add is that what you see in front of you is a very good picture. What you've seen with these two panels is a very good glimpse, because you've seen Black unity across all different kinds of traditions and rooted in the beautiful traditions of the Buddha. And you have seen unity across so many different sanghas. So that's awesome.
Sorry. So there was a lady in the back around the last 2 or 3 rows, and she raised her hand several times, and we missed you.
Yes. Yep. You. Yes, ma'am.
You know who you are if you raised your hand 3 times. And
Okay.
That's you.
Hi. Thank you. Okay, sorry. So I grew up in an activist, atheist household. And what I've heard so many people in my community share about their trauma around institutionalized religion with the Christian homes they grew up in, I experienced when I went deep into my study of Buddhism. And I had to leave. And we've talked about, a lot of people have mentioned things that were important for me, and about there is a white supremacist colonized lens through which all has been translated. And there's so many topics, and the way they are interpreted and the way they are taught, and what the powers that be that are taking the role of teacher decide to tell you is the truth and is not the truth. And if you don't agree with them, then you're just in a state of delusion, and this is the only way you can interpret these words that the Buddha said. And of course, whatever this translation is has to be exactly, there's no such thing as how many different languages did this filter through, and no acknowledgement that it wasn't even written down at the time it was said, and blah, blah, blah. So I guess with all of that, as like a larger umbrella, I'm just really want to bring in the word, what was really important to me, and one of the most difficult things was the elitism and the narrow-mindedness that had to do with, what's the word I'm looking for? Shaming or negating spiritual truths in any other lineage other than Buddhism, and shaming and negating the word spirit, period. And I think as Black people and as African Americans, our entire history is of finding the truth we need through all the different things that have been colonized upon us, and the ways in which we have been prevented from practicing. And I experience the difference in the ways the Dharma is held through people of color and people specifically of African descent. So I just wanted to ask about your relationship to the word spirit, your relationship to the word spirituality, your relationship to other spiritual traditions or wisdoms that have come out of other spiritual traditions, as evidenced simply from the difference in how you quote people when you're teaching a Buddhist teaching, but just your relationship to that, how you hold it for yourself, anything that comes up for you. Thanks.
Before there's one answer, I just want to say, if you're not in theology school, you should be. Please consider that. That's what we do.
So I'd like to say that the one thing that the Buddha did talk about was direct experience. He said, a lot of these things that I'm telling you about, I'm telling you because I had the direct experience of it. But words are going to be inadequate, you know, I can only point to it, but you have to have the direct experience for yourself. So coming out of church, I'm probably the only Buddhist I know who didn't have a problem with Jesus and God and all those kinds of things, because I had a certain kind of direct experience that revealed something to me from the inside out. So my only problem and what caused me to even look outside of that is that I said one day, you know, the good I would do, I don't do, and what I don't want to do, many times I do. How can I be delivered from this? You know, I like Jesus. I want to come up to the fullness of the measure of his stature, and I believe that it's possible, but I need some more help here. I need some more information, and that's what I was looking for. I was looking for what wasn't said in there. I mean, if the Vatican has 10,000 manuscripts and I got 66 chapters that comes about this, I'm missing something. And so I was looking for more information to bear witness to what he said was possible, that I believed I could rise to the occasion for. And so it's like that. It's like that with this Dharma. I don't care who's translated. I can read something and I get a check in my inside that says that's not the full story. Or that might be true, but now's not the time to do it that way. Or now it is, but I'm not the one who should do it. Or, you know, so the Buddha talks about the awakened nature, that as we peel back these, much like peeling back the skin of a banana, we come to that intrinsic nature that is stainless and pure. That's what I'm looking. So this whole walk is about peeling back, you know, and re-examining the information I get from every place outside that speaks to me, you know, and also checking what speaks to me from the inside. This is a personal, individual walk that governs how we carry ourselves in the world, but is not a play manual for what to do in the world. You see, so you cannot bypass the heart. You've got to start with the heart. And this cheetah, this mind of the heart, that pure part is what emerges. And that's the difference, you know, like studying Dharma is not the same thing as cultivating it.
Thank you, Venerable. I'd like to thank you all and for allowing us to share ourselves with you and spending the time together. I'd like to welcome Melvin, sorry, I'm not good at names today. Melvin Mcleod, since I named the son.
Thank you. Okay. I'm Melvin Mcleod. I'm the editor-in-chief of Lions Roar, which is with the Thich Nhat Hanh program here, co-hosting this event. It is my great honor to close this public event and to mark the closing of the gathering, the private dialogue among teachers of Black African descent that's been happening since Friday. Two outstanding things have struck me. The first is the heartfelt pleas from several people in the audience, probably people who practice within majority white sanghas, to connect with Black Buddhist teachers as teachers and as mentors. And I would like to say that Lions Roar and Union Theological Seminary have an ambition to keep working together. We share so much in terms of our basic values, both as a Buddhist program, indeed, within Union, as well as with the Christian program, which is, of course, the basis of this. Nonetheless, the deep spiritual and human values we share are profound. And so I'd like to say that we have heard that need and will look at ways in which we can work together to address it. So, since that idea is exactly an hour old, I have nothing else to say at this point, but stay tuned as we ponder it, because clearly we would like to do our best to help make that connection that people have asked for. The second outstanding thing today is the obvious brilliance and deep life experience and heart of the teachers we've seen here today. I know many of them individually. Others I've worked with with their writings and worked with them as an editor. But it has been a transformative experience for me to see them here collectively together, to see the collective power and brilliance of Black Buddhist teachers. And that's why this gathering has been historic, because to my knowledge, that has never happened before, that Black Buddhist teachers have come together in this way. And I'd also just like to note that here today, we've seen fewer than half of the people who participated in the gathering. Buddhism is right now undergoing a significant and much needed transformation for all of the very correct reasons and critiques we've heard today. That should not be and can't be a superficial change. It has to be a change in the way we understand what Buddhism in this society is and what its narrative is, or its multiple narratives, its concerns, how it's engaged in the society, and how its communities operate. Many different aspects of deep change. Many of the people you've seen today are already deeply influential as individuals in that transformation that's taking place. Nonetheless, I have a supplication I would like to make to you, using a very traditional Buddhist term of supplication. And I make that on behalf of all practitioners and future practitioners, and the very Dharma itself and how it's going to evolve in this world going forward. And that is a supplication to continue to work together and to have dialogue, to bring the tremendous collective brilliance and deep heart and commitment to others that we've seen today to bear in the future, so that Buddhism in the society can be of the most benefit to the most people. So on behalf of all Buddhists, I ask you to continue to come together and create great benefit, and I can say with certainty that I know you will. So thank you very much.
Thank you. And I'm available for a few minutes if anybody has any questions.
Thank you very much for showing up.
I'm just going to say this, whether y'all can keep moving. It is important to name that in 2002, there was the first African American conference and retreat that was held. And so this is the first time that only teachers are together, but we did have a 100-person gathering in 2002 that was hosted at Spirit Rock.
And one last thing that I'd like to say is that the gathering that's happening next year at Spirit Rock, we are raising money for that gathering in order for it to happen, so that the teachers are supported completely. There's no cost. And so if anyone in the room is interested in being a part of that financial support, please see me. I'd love that. Thank you.